This is the Above Average Podcast, and you are listening because you want an above average life. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Above Average Podcast, the podcast where we talk to above average people about their above average lives. Now, just as a warning to start off with, some of the subjects in today's episode are a bit dark, and they may trigger some people, they may affect you in ways that I do not intend. So with that said, please, listen responsibly to these kind of podcasts. So my guest today is probably one of the craziest stories that I've had on this show. He's a former self-proclaimed frequent flyer in the criminal justice system. Having been a heavy drug user, he's overdosed countless times and attempted suicide, but has since built his life around helping drug users and spreading awareness of the drug naloxone, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, which can be used to reverse the effects of overdoses, which I'd never heard of, so I'm really interested to hear this. Please welcome Mr. Gorgeous George Charlton to the show. How are you, mate?
Good. You got my name right as well. Gorgeous George. It's the name which I gave myself, but you know what I mean? I think it's very
Well, don't tell people that.
No, it's fine, man. You know,
it was given by all the women you've ever met.
Oh, man, God. Well, I'm generally making them cry, but no, man, that's been a really nice introduction and really blessed to be here and be on your podcast. Thanks.
No, I really appreciate you coming in, mate. So, I know obviously you've said that you love to go off on tangents and stuff,
Absolutely.
and I love guests that go off sometimes. So, but I'm gonna try my best to stick to the questions I got for you, make sure the audience fully understands your story and what's going on. Yeah. So, first off, I want to go back to the sort of mid-teen years. Am I correct that that's when you were first introduced to substances, about 14, 15?
Yeah. I suppose for me, like many young people my age, my first introduction to a psychoactive drug was alcohol. I think we don't necessarily see alcohol as a drug, but its chemical formula is C2H5OH. It's one carbon atom short of acetone. If you added an atom of carbon into the things that we drink, it would strip your nails. So a lot of the lasses kind of are using nail varnish remover, which is like alcohol ethanol. So that was the first kind of substance that I ever used, and I think really interesting for me was the way in which alcohol made me feel. So long before I ever used alcohol, I was a very nervy kid. I was very kind of anxious. I used to get the piss taken out of me a lot, a bit of bullying and stuff. But I found when I had that bottle of Old English in Westmoreland Court Flats and I drank that, I remember kind of feeling really relaxed and calm and turning a bit of a funny fucker, actually. So what I found was then people were laughing with me rather than at me. Yeah. And I think probably at an unconscious level, that was the time that I kind of recognised that maybe alcohol could do for me what I couldn't do for myself. Yeah,
it's interesting that, because I think, especially with the funny guy thing, I think once people start getting a laugh, it's very addicting to make people laugh.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and totally. And also, it's kind of like, it's positive regard, isn't it? So, like, a lot of I was a real outsider, man. Like when I was young, and I kind of made myself like that. I think, you know, like when I used to look at the way young kids played and interacted when I was very small, they used to kind of it used to look very natural. It used to look very normal. They used to look very comfortable. And I didn't feel the way that they looked. Like, for me, it was really awkward and uncomfortable. And I did have national health glasses, and I had terrible hair. And my dad used to spit in his hand and do that on your hair to kind of get your partner and stuff. And I didn't fit. I definitely didn't fit. You know, in school, I think you had kind of a number of different classes, like social classes almost. So you had like the dressers and the trendies, and I didn't fit into that group. I was getting Clark shoes and that boat, you know what I mean? And then you had like the academics and the wise people, and I was thick as fucking mince, so I didn't kind of fit into that group. Then you had kind of like the terribly overweight and kind of the people who typically got the piss taken out of them in school, and even they were saying, fuck you're not in our group, you know. And I was kind of creating a social group in my school, and I was the only member. Do you know what I mean? And it kind of felt like a really lonely, scary, uncomfortable place to be. So obviously, kind of when you end up using like a substance like alcohol, and you feel relaxed and you kind of feel like you fit in. I used to drink with a couple of, with three older lads as well, and I used to get a lot of like positive regard from them in terms of like I felt part of a gang, part of a clique that didn't take the piss out of me. They kind of looked after me. Yeah. They were into heavy metal. With Neil, Andrew, and Gordon Johnson, the three brothers from heaven, and they introduced me to kind of Saxon and Metallica. And it wasn't long before my hair was growing longer, and I had a denim jacket with no sleeves on, with Saxon embroidered in the back, and a red leather jacket, and we used to go down the Happy Valley, down the Tyne, and drink Clan Dew, which was white wine and whiskey, or go to the Handyside arcade. And I kind of felt part of something then, you know, but I kind of think kids my age have really struggled with that. So, some kind of like some fond memories of, like, some dark memories earlier on from that, but kind of some fond memories of kind of, as I got a little bit older, 14, 15, and starting to find me place among social groups who kind of accepted me, that kind of felt good, man.
It's interesting that, because for me in school, I mean, I don't know, we've only spoke a handful of times, but you could probably gather that I'm a little bit nerdy, I'm a little bit like, you know, I'm not the most out there person. Yeah, I can speak in a bit more confidently than I did in school, but I think for me as well, I never fit in anywhere as well. I used to float between groups, and then if I remember trying to join in on some laughs sometimes, or like, you know, when you try and extend a joke because you want to join in, and then everyone just kind of stares at you like, what the fuck you doing? Yeah, and that was me like 90% of school, probably until I was like 16, and I started to actually find in the last year or two of school that I actually had friends. Yeah. But in terms of like the dark places you mentioned, just is there anything that you can briefly mention about that time in school? Because was it like a rough time in school? Was it rough like on you, or?
I think it was rough on lots of kids, like back in the the very early 80s. Like I went to a junior school where they used to beat the shit out of you with bamboo canes on your legs, and they used to hit you with meter rulers on your hands.
Yeah, chalkboard things.
But I was only like 8 and 9 year old. I was just a little vulnerable lad. Do you know what I mean? And you had adults who were hitting you like that, and I think like it was really difficult to understand like why that was happening, because I wasn't a bad kid. Do you know what I mean? I had a very loving family. I felt really safe at home. There was a lot of love, a lot of warmth. We had nice holidays, and then every day I went to this school where academically I really struggled, man. I've always really struggled with kind of numbers and maths and stuff like that. So I wasn't deliberately kind of trying to get things wrong. I just found it really hard to get my head around stuff. And from time to time I ended up getting hit. And I think like when they did that, like they hurt me hands, but they hurt my mind more. And I became genuinely petrified. It was petrified at the time, but traumatized by getting hurt like that. And that happened a fair bit, man, where like I used to kind of think if I can't go to school, then I'm not going to get hit. So I started like to scratch myself at him and scratch myself
just with your nails
until I bled. I would scratch in the house until I started bleeding. Because if you're bleeding, your mum doesn't send you to school. Do you know what I mean? And then I learned like that I could vomit. If I made myself sick without putting my fingers down my throat, then you wouldn't go to school. And if you didn't go to school, then you didn't get hit. So I had a period of time out of school, and I went to see the doctor with me mum, and doctors weren't tuned into young people's mental health back then, definitely not. And he said, look, just send him back to school. It's just a phase that he's going through, back to school. So back to school I went, and back to being hit I went, and it kind of fucked my head up, man. Like, and my mum had a faith, and she sent me to see a priest at St. Aloysius Church, and to get some spiritual counsel. And when I was there, I got more than spiritual counsel. Like, I was there, and I was left there for an hour or two at a time while this priest was supposed to help me, but instead of helping me, he raped me. And he used to like to touch my cock. And he used to like me to touch his cock. And he used to like to anally rape me and tell me if I told anyone what he was doing to me, that nobody would believe me, they would believe him. And I believed him.
How old were you at this point?
Poor. 10-year-old maybe.
And how long did that abuse go on for?
Maybe a year. And it was really fucking painful, man, because like at that time it was like I didn't register what was going on.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't nice, but I didn't know, was it normal? Was it not normal?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was fucking, it was mad, and I certainly didn't feel like I could go away and tell my parents. Like I just didn't go away and tell my parents what was going on, man.
Yeah.
And like for me, you know, it's like, it's easy to think when we get later on into the story and we start talking about different kinds of harder drugs and stuff like that. Sometimes when we think about addiction, the starting point for our thoughts as members of the general public is that person's took heroin or crack and they've ended up in that place that they're in.
Yeah.
But we don't kind of recognise the story in the many thousands of stories of people who experienced trauma like I did early on in their life, you know, because like that was a really horrendous fucking time, man. And it was like, but it was just the start, you know. It was like then going into secondary school was like next level of physical abuse. It was like they would beat the shit out of you. They had these leather straps, right? And they were like a centimetre thick, these leather straps. Maybe it's 12 inches long. And they had a handle cut out at the end for the... Like, it was purposely made to
hit
fucking
people
with. And they'd beat the shit out of you, man. And again, it really hurt, man. It physically hurt. But it done me mind, man.
So it's just to put it in perspective, it's you go to school, you're getting hit there, you try to get some help, the priest abuses you, and even then you go to a new school where it's like, okay, maybe it's better and it's just as bad.
And then again I became kind of, then you had like, then I was like, and you know, like, this isn't me being down. There was a lot of great people at school, do you know what I mean? And there was probably a lot of people who wanted to try and be pals with me. I felt really fucking uncomfortable, you know? And but it was just, when you got hit like that, people would laugh. And again, that was another form of punishment. And it was like, it just felt for a long time, you know, like, maybe it's from the age of like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That time for me was absolutely consumed with physical abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, like institutional abuse. It just became like I was broken before I took a drug. And it's really easy. People go, well, if he hadn't took drugs in the first place, he wouldn't have ended up where he was. Well, no, man. Like, I was broken at the hands of like society long before I ever took a drug. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, and thank God things aren't like that now. But it's bad enough now, I think, in schools with kids.
Do you know what? I think if to be fair now, I think obviously you don't get hit in schools. There's no more canes. There's no more getting a blackboard rubber choked off you, you know. I think now is more psychological. I mean, obviously being hit, it does damage psychologically, but I think now it's like, if you bullied in school, you go home now and it's all online, you know, the psychological implications. I mean, the amount of like kids that are coming away apparently now with like suicidal thoughts, suicidal tendencies, they don't want to go to school and stuff. It's on the rise, but I'm always curious about like why people bully in school. And I genuinely think it's because if you don't bully yourself, you get bullied. I feel like it's a protective mechanism. And I actually feel like I went through a period where I wasn't very nice to people, sort of probably 16 to maybe 19, where everyone was the butt of my jokes. And maybe that was a response from, I mean, you know, I rarely got into fights or anything like that. It wasn't anything terrible, but I think it was just like, well, I don't want to be the laughing stock. I think that was the biggest thing for me.
And I think you can get dragged along in some of that stuff as well. It kind of becomes the norm. It's kind of like survival of the fittest in some ways, isn't it? You know, and I think for me, I always gravitated towards kind of like at school, I gravitated towards older people. Do you know what I mean? So like when I was young and in the early days of secondary school, I was kind of taken under the wing of many of the older lads in school, some of the hard lads and all the rest of it. Because then I kind of felt like I had a little bit of protection in some way, and almost as if they were a bit kinder to me. Do you know what I mean? But again, I absolutely want to reinforce, because I've got like a lot of people who I went to school with on my socials and stuff like that, you know, who are kind of really like supportive and complimentary of everything that I do now, you know, and I have to kind of like, it wasn't that they particularly did anything wrong to me, them, you know, it was kind of me just finding it really difficult as a young boy to understand my place in the world and how to deal with that, you know, because I think, like you said, when you were kind of like 14 or 15, you kind of found some things that you were good at. Yeah. Well, like for me, I kind of didn't feel I was good at anything. Like I was, like academically, I was no good at all. Like sport-wise, I was fucking terrible. I always got my glasses broke. My dad used to play professional football many years earlier, and he used to play squash, and he was really, like, sporty. And for me, I was terrible. Like, I was the kid when they were picking the football teams at school. They'd rather have a fucking player short than pick me on that team.
Mate, I relate to. That just hit me right in the gut. I'm like, yes, it's me.
So it's like, so it was just like, it wasn't good, man. And I kind of felt like, just get me out of fucking school. If I can get out of school, I had this kind of like this thing that, like, if I can become an adult, when I'm an adult, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
But I think kind of one thing I did kind of do really well at, I joined the Army Cadets when I was about 14 years old, and I fucking loved it, right? It was like, got that uniform on, and it was almost like I became somebody else. I was like a bit like Rambo. It was a bit like when Eminem was around. I bleached my hair for a period of time. I kind of felt like I could reinvent myself to be somebody else. Yes. Then I would be okay. And the Army Cadets was really interesting because it was like I used to get like positive regard and love in some ways from the kind of the adults, the sergeants, the colour sergeants. Like, I'd really take me time with me boots, and my uniform was always meticulous, and I would go in there and they'd be saying, Charlton, you know, well done, you fucking turned out really well. And that kind of like, that positive reinforcement energized me. It made me want to do more and do better. And then I ended up like getting a Lance Corporal stripe and a Corporal stripe and then a Cadet Sergeant. And I kind of thought, you know what, maybe my future lies in the military in some ways.
Well, before we get into the military, so I'm just curious, with everything, because I said obviously I made people the butt of jokes sometimes. Did you ever take that pain and give it to anyone else? Were you ever maybe a bit of a bully, or were you ever nasty to people because of this experience?
I was nasty to me as a result of that experience. Like, and you know, and that's not fucking like, that's not being down on you in any way. Like, we all
no. I was just curious about your experience.
You know, like, honest to God, man, I was never a hard man. I was never a fighter. Like, I lived honestly like until probably the age of about 30-year-old. My life was just consumed in fear. Like, all of the time, like, fucking hyper vigilant, like, shit scared all of the time. Like, you know, I used to, when I was young, I used to steal from the place where my dad worked. I used to steal money. And then that money would allow us to kind of take people to the arcades and that. I was almost trying to like buy friendships and stuff, which was really fucking sad. Then two older lads, they found out what I was doing. They started coming knocking on my door saying, we know you're stealing money off your dad, so now you need to start taking stuff out of the house and giving it to us.
Like a blackmail?
It wasn't like blackmail, it fucking was.
You
know what I mean? So the place which used to be my sanctuary, which was my home, was no longer my sanctuary, and I was waiting for that knock on the door, and I was terrified, man. And you know, what it did for me was it didn't kind of want me to project like any kind of hurt and pain onto other people like that. It made me want to like hide away and to isolate. Do you know what I mean? And you know, it's like I don't want this to be a story of poor me, because I had nice times when I was younger. I had lovely times with my parents. I did have good times doing things in the Army Cadets. Do you know what I mean? But like, these people who go, school, best years of your life, like, fuck that, man.
Do you know what? I've never found that either. I've always thought to me, like, people used to say to me, enjoy school years, it's the best years of your life. No, do you know what the best years of my life were? Making me and doing what I wanted to do and trying to do something else. It wasn't go to school from 9 till 3, learn some shit you don't give a crap about, and then like, it was just pointless for me. Like, school, I mean, for some people they love that, they love school, they love university, they're all about the education. I'm fine with that. I've got nothing against people that do that, but for me, couldn't give a shit.
Nah, totally. And each to their own, isn't it? I suppose, like you're saying, people who love it and enjoy it and are good at it and excel, well, that's fine. But definitely for me, that was like, schooling wasn't my time to learn. Do you know what I mean? I think it was a time when I was like, I was broken, I was hurt, I was fearful, and it kind of set a course. It set a course around kind of like pain, trauma, adverse childhood experience, which made me kind of like very frightened, very distrusting of other people, really wanting to isolate, really wanting to hide away, and desperately trying to find solutions to change the way that I was feeling, because my genuine feeling was one of anxiety and inadequacy, not good enough.
When did you start to notice it was like a downward spiral for you? Did you notice that's what you were in, or was it just one day you woke up and like, fuck, this is where I'm at?
Yeah, man. I think I'd always been aware of kind of just the anxiety and that like that racing brain, man. Like I kind of use the term analysis paralysis in some way because I would kind of just analyze, and it would kind of, it's kind of like, what is it they say, like where your attention goes, your energy flows, results show. And my attention was absolutely on the negatives, the things that I wasn't very good at, the way kind of people felt about me. It was kind of like, it was just really, really difficult. But as I said earlier, like when I started using alcohol and knocking around with different people, I kind of started to realize like that drugs could do for me what I couldn't do for myself. So kind of like alcohol would make me kind of quite lively and animated and the joker and all the rest of it. And then it wasn't long before like somebody said, well, do you want to have a smoke of this joint? And I was like, well, I've never smoked a joint before. I used to smoke cigarettes, but I thought, fuck it, I'll have a go at that. And I remember the first time I ever smoked a joint was in a pub in Hebburn called the White Lead, and it was a shithole in there, like, but it was great, man. It was our shithole, and I used to be in there at 16-year-old. I mean, drinking pints of scotch, and knew that I was 16 because I got a fucking 18 birthday card 2 years later off the bartender. But it was our little community. We'd go into that pool room out the back, and you used to be able to smoke in the pubs then, and we used to have a cheeky joint and that joint was passed to me, and I remember having a smoke of it, and having like the biggest whitey in my life. It just knocked me sick. And I ended up in the toilet with me top off, lying on the tile floor, trying to cool down, like vomiting and saying, God, if I get through this, man. Like I sound like a right fanny because it was only a joint, but like I was thinking, if
if
I get through this, then I'm never going to do it again. And then I got through it, but then I did it again. And I kind of, in every rule I ever set myself around drugs, around I'm never going to do that again, I always ended up doing it again. But I guess that when I understood kind of like cannabis and that you're not meant to smoke it like a cigarette and you just have a couple off and pass it around and that, then that really sedated me, but then in a positive way again. So it was like this hyper vigilant George, which was like fucking always on edge. Now all of a sudden was like, oh man, I feel okay, man. Like I feel really calm here, and I'm around people who are from different schools. So maybe it's around the age of like 16 and stuff, I started to get friendship groups who kind of just absolutely accepted me for me. I became part of something, and that's something which brought us together. And anyway, one was our friendship and where we lived locally, but the other was that we liked to smoke a bit of hash and we went and played a game of pool, and I kind of thought, oh, maybe things are going to be okay. So for a period of time, like drug use was fine, you know, kind of using cannabis, and then a bit of LSD, which was fucking no good for me at all because I would just end up taking it, getting paranoid, and then hiding in the bushes down the time.
You mentioned something to me about you got paranoid and thought the police were hiding in the bushes and stuff, didn't you? Yeah. What was that story?
Well, that was literally kind of just, again, it's like irresponsibility around drug use and not really understanding what it was that I was doing. So kind of, I suppose that story was on the back of like amphetamines and speed. Like it was something that I ended up using recreationally. When I used amphetamines, that kind of felt like I arrived like a little tenner bag of whiz in a cigarette paper, and you neck that, and then half an hour later, like the feeling of being like, fucking hell, like upper height, like shoulders back, super confident, could talk to the girls, do you know what I mean? Like the girls talking back to me, great fucking dancer, do you know what I mean? Like this amphetamine is the solution, right? It absolutely was, man. For me, that's how I took it. It was a solution, and I ended up like having it on weekends, but then having it just have a bit on a Monday, and then maybe it's a bit on a Wednesday, and then before you know where I am, I'm taking it every single day, not sleeping, and ended up with like amphetamine-induced psychosis. So on this one occasion, after not sleeping for a period of time, there's people shouting on us, but there's nobody there. I'm seeing things, but there's nobody there. Do you know what I mean? Like auditory and visual hallucinations, which happens if you don't sleep. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And I ended up taking some cannabis that I had an ounce of cannabis stashed away upstairs and taking that downstairs because I seen the police outside of my dad's bushes. But he didn't have bushes. Do you know what I mean?
So not only did you see the police, but you also saw the bushes.
So kind of going down to see him, going, look, the police are outside, you need to take this. And my dad's going, what the bloody hell is this? Because he had no idea about drugs or anything. I'm saying, the police are outside, you need to take it and hide it. And he looks outside and goes, George, you know, like, there's nobody out there. There's no bushes out there.
Jesus.
But what's this?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Was that the first time you knew that you were doing anything like that?
Yeah, and I think I kind of rationalised to him that it's just a bit of cannabis. It was what everyone was doing. Like, I don't know what I kind of said. Obviously, I didn't talk a lot about amphetamines and other drugs that had been taken, but I was definitely using substances to try and kind of like regulate how I was feeling on different days.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And I had some fucking great times, man. I'm not like I'm kind of like not going to sit on this podcast and go like all drugs are bad and they're going to kill you, because that's not true. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think for me, like, those people who were using exactly the same drugs as I was, who didn't end up where I did, and what that suggests is that was nothing. Like, my problems were nothing to do with the drugs. It was the way in which I was using them and the attitudes towards them.
Yeah. Which I mean? I'm gonna touch on at the end as well. The attitude, because that's the one thing that I think that you really want to get on, is attitudes that people have towards drug users. So tell me about being caught with drugs in the army. Tell me about that. What happened there?
Yeah, man. So, like, you know, like, I think the army cadets thing was mint, but they said it was, we think you're taking this too serious, George. Perhaps you should go and join the army. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And it was kind of like a backhanded compliment in some ways. So, I had aspirations that I used to play the bugle. And the drums on Remembrance Sunday around kind of Gateshead Cenotaph and stuff. I was quite good actually. Do you know what I mean? It was like it was really beautiful to be able to kind of to do that thing. And so I had aspirations that I either wanted to play the bugle for the Royal Marines at Albemarle. I can't remember the way the barracks were, but either way. Or I wanted to be a pilot in the Army Air Corps. Bearing in mind, I didn't even have a fucking GCSE or anything, so I was delusional.
Yeah.
So when the Army Careers Office in Shields on Ocean Road, and sat the aptitude test, and they said, yes, you can join. I was like, yes. And they said, but you can't be a pilot, and you can't be in the Marines, but what you can be is a blanket stacker, a storeman in the Army Ordnance Corps. And I was like, all right, fuck it, well, I'll do that. So, because I think what I'd recognised was that, like, that the substances I was taking, I think I kind of had a moment of clarity where I was thinking, like, you're getting a bit of an issue here with the whiz, do you know what I mean, with the amphetamines. Like, I found out that, like, I didn't have to pay £10 for a gram. I could actually get an ounce for 90 quid, which was like 28 grams. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
So, like, it became kind of really easy for us to get those drugs, and I was stealing a lot in order to fund the habit. I was doing like a YTS and that at the time, youth training scheme. I think you used to get £19.50 a week on the YTS. So I thought, fuck it, I'm going to join the army. But I was concerned that maybe I would have some withdrawals off the amphetamines, so I took a 9 bar of cannabis with us to me regiment, and it was about 350 quid for a 9 bar at the time, quarter kilo. And it sounds a lot, and I suppose it is a lot in some ways, but it was what it was. And I thought, right, if I'm feeling overwhelmed, if I'm feeling anxious, I can have a cheeky joint. Didn't for 1 minute think it through, man. Didn't for 1 minute think it through, like, kind of going, you're going to join the armed forces, you're going to take a big lump of hash with you. Do you know what I mean? Like, there could
hindsight says that's not a smart move.
There could be consequence, and I don't know that, like, for me, I think that's been one of the issues I've had for many years in my life, was like, I've never looked at the chain of events of my actions. Do you know what I mean? I've never kind of looked at what could be the end consequence, either positive or negative, of my kind of behaviours and choices. Yeah. So I got to Deep Cut Camberley, Surrey. And I'd been in basic training for about 4 weeks, and I fucking loved it, man. I'm telling you, I was army balmy, and I hadn't touched a single bit of that hash. And then this kid turned up from Middlesbrough late, like, and we started talking about, like, he'd called him Mark, and he started talking about raves, like, I used to do the Eclipse in the venue, and I'm going, did you fuck? We used to take E's, and we kind of just were thick as thieves, and then it just automatically came out my mouth, I've got some hash, and he goes, hey, fuck, I go, aye, shall I have a smoke? And, like, we just ended up, like, colluding, and I got this 9 bar and a bit of chunk off for me, a bit of chunk off for him, and went into the toilet and skinned a joint up, and I picked the little bit of hash that I had left in my joint, and he picked his joint up, but he didn't pick the hash up, and he left the hash on the floor, a small bit of hash in the toilets, and him and I off, and we went, not out the camp, we weren't allowed to go out the camp, and in the trees, having a smoke, getting stoned in the fucking army and that, do you know what I mean? And when we walked back to the billet, the sergeant's pointing like, you two, come here. And what's this? Like that shit. Like, my arse fell out. Like, absolutely fell out. Because there was the consequence right there, right then. Yeah. Smacked me in the face. Arrested, put in the guard room, regimental military police called. And I'm sitting now going, shit, man. Because like I've never been like in all of the mess that I've been in prisons and all the rest of it. I've never been, and this isn't being down on people who are in the prisons, but I've never been cut from like I've never been a hard man that can deal with that type of stuff. I always end up out my depth, and this was a moment where I was like absolutely out my depth. Where the military police came, they did a piss test. Showed positive for amphetamines as well. I got marched and put in front of the commanding officer who said he had powers where he could send me to prison for a year, but he wasn't happy to do that. He wanted to make an example of me. And again, I'm going, what the fuck? Like, how do I stop this from happening?
Yeah.
But there was no stopping it. You know, I was powerless over this situation. And he ended up getting extended powers. And then I was sentenced to 3 years. 3 years in the glass house in Colchester. And I ended up doing 2 years in there and then binned and chucked out. And it was like painful, man, because like that was the one thing that I felt I could be good at.
Yeah.
And I excelled in that prison environment. You know, it wasn't like other prisons that I went to where you kind of behind the door for 23 hours a day. It's very much about, it was a working prison. You got up, you were doing 10-mile battle runs around Colchester. Do you know what I mean? You were actively doing military training, and lots of people who typically get sent to Colchester prison, depending on their offences, normally they would go back to their unit, and within a period of time they would get promoted. Yeah. Which sounds bizarre, but you come out of there fucking like switched on. Do you know what I mean? And those recommendations went back from the commanding officer of the prison to say to my commanding officer, you shouldn't be discharged. You'll be an asset to the British Army. Do you know what I mean? But like at that time, I needed to be made an example of, and that was it.
Hard look at the judge, that, wasn't it? But it's funny as well that you mentioned this sort of like not thinking before you act kind of thing. No. I'm guessing that was something that has like continued on
even now, but you know what it is? I think it's really clear, right, that I've got like undiagnosed ADHD. Definitely, do you know what I mean? And it is me superpower, right? But back then I didn't realise any of that stuff. Do you know what I mean? And my impulsivity today I use in a very positive way. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah.
But for me it was never. None of the shit that I ended up getting myself in was ever about hurting anybody else. Do you know what I mean? It was about trying to like win people over or make myself feel okay. Do you know what I mean? Or kind of just like I don't know, man, just to find my place in the world. But I came out of that prison at the age of 21, and my mum and dad drove down to collect us from Colchester, and. It was a really painful one, that actually having to tell my parents, because initially when I ended up getting caught with the cannabis, and I was always a person that would phone my mum and dad every day, always, and then all of a sudden it went from phoning them every day to then there wasn't a phone call this one day, and it couldn't have been a phone call because I was in the guard room, so there was a period, a couple of days, 3 days where I hadn't phoned, so obviously my dad got concerned and he phoned up, and they said, we'll get him to phone you, we can't tell you what's happening, but we'll get him to phone.
That must have been scary for them to hear that as well.
Aye, totally, man, because they knew there was something going on. Do you know what I mean? So I remember phoning my dad, and he said, "Is everything all right?" And I was going, "Yeah, it's just been a mistake." And he said, "Well, what kind of mistake?" And I said, "Well, I was thirsty." I was thirsty, and I wanted a can of pop. The naffy was shut, so what I did was I jumped the fence to go to a local shop to go and get a can of pop, and they've said that I went AWOL. Right, and my dad was going, "Oh, George, that's ridiculous, you know, kind of, look, get it sorted out, son, please let us phone us back, let us know what's happening." So I was kind of thought, swerve that. And then obviously when you get fucking sentenced to 2 years, and I'm speaking to my dad on the phone, he goes, "Come on, George. Like, nobody gets sentenced to 2 years for a kind of pop. What's going on?" And I had to kind of cough, man, and say, like, I used a bit of cannabis. I've been using a bit of cannabis at home, which he knew about. Yeah. Like, I've got myself in a load of trouble. And he said, "We'll love you, and you'll be all right, and we'll support you, you know." And
the part of the story that I love is the fact that your parents were always, you know, like you hear a lot of these stories. Like I've interviewed quite a few people, and I know people who've gone down dark routes because their parents were horrible to them or whatever. Your parents seem really lovely, and it's like that. I think that's a big difference that most people think, oh well, maybe he didn't have a nice upbringing or whatever. It's like, no, your parents were fine. And I think
addiction doesn't discriminate, Adam. I think kind of thinking about people who use drugs and I think there's a difference between like drug use and drug addiction. There's a huge distinction between those things. It's wrong to put them it's wrong to put them both together. You know, I know extremely wealthy people, affluent people up and down the country who've got loved ones who turn to substances. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And some substance use is about kind of like, is about good times and fun times, and they never go on to develop any big problems with the drugs that they're taking. Do you know what I mean? Whereas other people like me were typically using to fill a void or to help them find their place in the world. But again, it's important to stress, like, it wasn't all bad, you know, like that. I didn't consciously go, right, I'm smoking this joint now, or I'm drinking this Old English because I was physically abused or I was hit at school.
It's just unconscious.
It was just like I was doing it because that's what you did. And for me, around like the late 80s, early 90s, like fucking... I don't know how old you are. How old are you?
I'm 28, mate.
Oh, he's just a spring chicken.
Yeah, 1996.
Sorry. So, like, but around, like, the late 80s, early 90s, like, the rave culture, man, like across the
I've seen the movies. I've seen the movies.
It was like, you know, you had, in Shields alone, you had the Tunnel Club, it used to be the Chelsea Cat. You had Images, which was on Chichester Roundabout. You had the After Dark, which was over in Sunderland. You had the Blue Monkey, which was, it was like, the Blue Monkey was like... it was an old theatre. It had like 3 floors, and it was just fucking rammed with people, all full of ecstasy.
Yeah.
Fucking, like, I've got goosebumps now thinking about it. Like, not a beer in sight. The police outside, fully aware, like, what's going on inside.
Yeah.
Not a bit of violence or anything at the time, and it was fucking amazing, man. Like, the time was it was a really beautiful time of like unity and love, and you could go anywhere up and down the country, and there was none of this, like, you go to Scotland, fucking English bastards, and there was none of that.
Everyone was joined in.
Everyone was like, like, where you from, what you on, do you know what I mean? Like, how you, like, that type of stuff. So culturally, that's what was going on.
Yeah.
And I got, like, really, I didn't get sucked into it. I fucking raced towards it, as many others. I became a bit of an MC. My mate used to DJ. He was DJ Beatmaster. I was MC BSE. We'd go out raving, then we'd go back to his flat. He'd get the decks on. I'd get the mic out. We'd have loads of people back, smoking joints. And it was just a really great time.
Yeah.
Until it wasn't. Do you know what I mean? And I think for me, it went kind of like the... getting binned out of the army, having to come back to Hebburn, where I was living. There was a lot of shame in me. There was a lot of like, shit, what am I going to do? Like, I had a hole in me. I had a hole in me career, like, for 2 years. Like, how was I ever going to be able to explain where I'd where I'd been? I had no qualifications. I had no GCSEs. Like, I managed to get a job at Focus DIY on a promise from a sergeant in the military that he would write as a positive reference, and it wasn't Focus DIY, it was somewhere else, but I give his name. They sent off for the reference. He replied, "Don't employ him, he's a drug user." Shafted me, man. Do you know what I mean? And it was just like, really, like, how the fuck do you come back from that?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I think the answer was kind of, well, just take a bit of this, take a bit of that, because you know that you're going to start feeling better. But my drug use escalated, so it was less about like recreational drug use and taking drugs like MDMA. It was more like about using amphetamines, but like copious amounts of the stuff.
Yeah.
And then
it's like it became a need. Would you say?
Yeah, totally, man, totally. Like trying to, because those feelings of inadequacy and low self-worth and fucking like shame and being a letdown and letting my parents down, and like I was almost back, you know, like how I'd been when I was younger, where I was just consumed with that negative stuff. Do you know what I mean? And I couldn't see like a way of getting any respite from that thinking. So then, like, I would end up taking amphetamines because I think I'd want to be high. But then as soon as I took amphetamines, I'm kind of going, shit, man, I wish I'd never had that. So I started necking like benzodiazepines, like Valium or temazepam. And then alcohol had kind of like, was no longer about going to pubs. It was about like White Lightning. Do you know what I mean? So like fucking 3 litre bottles of White Lightning. There's not an apple in it. They've got a cheat calling it cider. Do you know what I mean? But then now all of a sudden you're like what they call a polydrug user. So like you've got kind of uppers in your system. Then you're taking copious amounts of benzodiazepines, which are central nervous system depressants. So I'm kind of like really, really sleepy. Alcohol's a central nervous system depressant as well. Yeah. Then I'm taking kind of like, then then I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
Yeah.
Then, like,
well, you'd be all over the place with that in your system.
yeah,
You wouldn't
yeah.
know whether you come and go and where the hell you
And
are.
invariably, I was ending up either in hospital
Yeah.
or I was ending up in police stations because I was almost like having conscious blackouts. It
Yeah.
was like kind of, I'm just going to take a little bit of this, but then before I knew where I was no longer aware of what I was doing.
Yeah.
And you start to become a frequent flyer then within the criminal justice system. Do you know what I mean? And or getting done for kind of like resisting arrest, but having no recollection of the things that I was that I was doing. And then those networks of people who I did have around me were going, like,
You're too much.
You're too much now. And then I became like the person your fucking family said, oh, you don't want to go knock around with him. He's the bad crowd. And I was kind of like. I was on this like I wrote this bit of research once. It was like part of what we talked about was the downhill circular place in Sunderland called Downhill, and there's a bus which is called the downhill circular, and it goes all the way around downhill, and that's where I was. I was on this place of like having moments where I was able to talk myself into jobs, like with employment agencies. It was like I ended up getting a job at a place called Waverley Vintners. Had no idea where I was going. It was just a case you need to turn up here at 9:30, George. Turned up there at 9:30, walked through some security into this big fucking factory. And what was in the factory? It was like wall to wall with every kind of alcohol you've ever seen in your life on Team Valley.
Yeah.
It was like fucking hell. So then started pinching a couple of little miniatures, and then before you know where you are, you're nicking a quarter bottle down your pants, and then a half bottle, and then I got found like outside of that place in a phone box, unconscious.
Just the typical stories that you do hear from these drug users and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm just curious because obviously jumping ahead a little bit, you did check yourself into rehab eventually. How old were you when that happened?
30.
So
there was a period of about a decade where kind of that madness, it really escalated with self-harm, razor blades through my face, kind of
self-attack and self-hatred, really, almost, isn't
loathing. I fucking loathed who I was, man. And you know what, like, I was angry, man. I was really fucking angry, man. And the only way I knew how to calm myself, I would get a razor blade and a big razor and get some pliers and trim away around it so I could get to the blade. It's stupid because I didn't want to cut my fingers, so I would use the pliers, and then I would get the pliers and hold the blade and then fucking put it through my skin or put it through me.
What did it feel like that did for you?
Calmed me instantly. Calmed me, man. It was like, and also again put me then. You start doing stuff like that, like, yeah, you're going to hospital. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
then you're unlocked psychiatric units, and that was my journey towards the rehab. Was very much about like the frequent flyer at the Bead Wing at South Tyneside Hospital, unlocked psychiatric units, treating me with drugs like Theorazine and Lagactyl, which absolutely just like they turn your emotion off, like you're dead inside. Do you know what I mean?
Bit of a zombie.
Yeah, man. And like. And whilst I was in those environments, it felt safe for me. Like, get some sandwiches, do a fucking jigsaw full of Theorazine. I felt kind of okay. But there was always that you were going back out. You were going back out. And on one occasion, me dad had said, because at this point, it's completely clear that I'm alcohol dependent, because he's thinking I'm hammering in the toilet. What the hell's he doing in the toilet with a hammer? And he goes in the toilet, and I'm lying on the floor in an alcohol withdrawal fit. Bang, bang. It's me head banging off the side of the wall. And alcohol's a really dangerous drug, man, where like once you've got a dependence on it, if you don't drink, the likelihood is you can fit and you can potentially die. So if I wasn't drinking every day, then I was having alcohol withdrawal fit. So like... But I'd had enough, man. Honest to God, I'd fucking had enough. It was like... it was... A lot of overdoses that I had were down to not being responsible in terms of the way I was taking them, and not being aware of the drugs and the harms that could happen as a result of taking them in the way that I was, right? Because like we didn't talk or tell. We just had this message: don't just say no to drugs. But fuck that, people take drugs, man. Do you know what I mean? So, but I wasn't getting those messages around how to do them safely, and I remember my dad said, I'm going to take your mum down to Uncle Jimmy's in Chesterfield. I'm going to drop her off. I'll spend a couple of days there. I'm going to come back, George. I'm going to fix you, man. I'm going to help you, son, because I love you.
Yeah.
And I said, I really appreciate that. And when I knew he was going to take her down and he had his plans, I also had mine. And mine were to start stealing tablets. So I started stealing warfarin off my mum. Warfarin, typically, it helps a person's blood to coagulate. So like my mum had a lot of strokes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps to thin the blood, sorry. So I thought, well, I'm going to steal a lot of warfarin. You don't get a buzz of it. And then I'm going to steal a load of dihydrocodeine, DF118s, which is a really strong opioid-based medication. And my plan was that when he went away to take her down to Uncle Jimmy's, I was going to take the warfarin, I was going to take the dihydrocodeine, I was going to drink a bottle of vodka and slash my wrists. And then that would be job done. That would be the problem over with. Do you know what I mean? And the idea with the warfarin was I would bleed to death quicker because my blood would be so thin. So I thought, where was I going to do it? And it made sense to do it in the wet room. They had a wet room for my mum because she couldn't lift her leg to get into a shower or a bath. Mm-hmm. So I thought, at least if I do it in the wet room, the blood will go on the on the vinyl floor, and I'll not ruin the carpet. Like that's where my fucking head was.
I love that in that moment that you're still considering.
I love my
just
parents.
The aftermath as well, which is the interesting part.
I didn't want to hurt anyone. It is.
Yeah.
I never wanted to fucking hurt anyone, Adam, and I did.
Mm-hmm.
I hurt a lot of people, but I got hurt, and I was hurt as well. Do you know what I mean? But hurt
people, man.
Yeah, man, and it was like fucking. Like I loved and worshipped my parents, but I didn't see a way out. You know, it was all good and well. My dad saying, "Oh, we'll come back and fix you," but like there'd been so many occasions before where my eyes have opened again, and I've woke up in an operating room getting stitches in us or covered in charcoal where I've had to have my stomach pumped. Do you know what I mean? And it like that feeling of going, man, I can't keep fucking doing it, man. I just can't, because I knew like it was going to start all over again. So the only way out seemed to be to do that. And my dad drove down to Jimmy's with my mum, and they got so far down the road, and they didn't have mobile phones and things then.
Yeah.
And he said to me, mum, just out of the blue, something's not right. Something doesn't feel right here. And he just literally turned the car around, drove back home, and found me lying in a pool of blood in the house. And
wow.
And ambulance, locked psychiatric unit, and then from there straight into the
Well, if they hadn't turned round, you would have been gone.
Do you know what it is? I think myself, my mum and my dad, we've always had just like a fucking really deep connection. I've just been to the cemetery before I came here. Jarrah Cemetery, had a few tears and that there. Like I fucking love them and miss them loads. We were a really lovely family, and I was kind of really blessed to have them as my parents, and a lot of how I am who I am now in terms of my values and how I am with my girls, you know, is based on how they were with me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like he turned around, he came back, and it's hard to think, man, isn't it? Like at least it is for me, you know, like what they went through, you know, they loved me, man, and to come in and go upstairs and to find their son unconscious, bleeding on the floor, like, or seeing me like in front of them slashing my face open, because you know, God, anyone else would be sick of that. I don't know that I would hope I would have the ability to do that for my girls. And I know
you would, because you know what it's like. But did they ever get mad at you? Did you ever have raised voices because of this stuff?
Yeah, that was a bit of a shout out. He was never one for lifting his hands, but he was fed up, man.
More heated moments. Yeah, I get that. Yeah,
like desperate. They were desperate, and you know what? Like they are kind of like representative of like, I reckon AdFam, which is a national carer support charity, they reckon there's like 5 million family members who are directly impacted by somebody's addiction issues across the UK. Do you know what I mean? So there's many people like my parents who are suffering in silence, worried about stigma. Do you know what I mean? Never believing that their loved ones will get well, getting this message pumped into them, which is like, don't go down with a sinking ship. Cut them off. Tough love. Tough love. You're like, fuck that, man. Tough love isn't love. Love is love. And my parents exuded that.
There's a place for tough love But there's also, if someone's going through what you went through, tough love's not the answer.
No, totally not, man. But equally, and definitely around like where addiction's concerned, right, and drug use, there's not a single bit of evidence anywhere that suggests that kind of punishment works as an effective tool to reduce somebody from drinking and using or taking drugs.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So like if putting people in custodial settings for 2 or 3 years doesn't deter people from kind of coming out and using drugs, or the Rodrigo Duterte is the president of the Philippines, and until very recently he was going on national television and saying, we're going to stop this drug problem that we've got in the Philippines, so this is what we're going to do. We've got a hotline number. This is no shit, I'm paraphrasing it in a Geordie way, right? But
as we do,
like, phone this number, and it was a number. If you're aware of people who are drug dealing, using drugs, phone this number, give us their name and their address, and we'll sort it out. And what he meant by sorting it out was they would send death squads, right? So people would go to those homes and they would murder, right? They would murder the person who was dealing drugs, right?
Jesus.
At that time, did drug use in the Philippines go up or down?
Well, it could go one or the way, because it could go down because people who are using drugs are getting killed, but also could go up just because
it had no impact.
Yeah.
And it did go up because criminalising, punishing people for taking drugs which are less harmful than alcohol doesn't do anything. People want to take them.
Yeah.
But like, so the thing for me is this: we've been conditioned to believe this narrative, which is that you've got to be cruel to people who are impacted by addiction. Do you know what I mean? Because being cruel to them or punishing them or putting them in prisons or like, do you know what I mean? Taking away their liberty, that's going to help them to stop taking drugs. It doesn't work. Do you know what I mean? And I think my mum and dad were like the epitome of like, nah, he's my son. We love him, and we're gonna have his back, and we're gonna support him. So I ended up in the year 2000 going into the Lazarus Centre, which was a rehab in Doxford Park in Sunderland.
Oh yeah.
That kind of came on the back of I was violently assaulted. I was stabbed in my face and I was stabbed in my back. I was left for dead.
What was that over?
Over nothing, really.
Was it a random attack or was it someone that knew?
I knew of them.
Right.
Yeah. But and I guess for me it's still it's not something I want to dip me toe into because
no worries.
Some of these people are still very current.
That's fine. Yeah, no.
But for me, around that time, it was an attack which terrified me. Like
I'm not surprised.
I was
man.
under the influence of drugs at the time. There was a bottle which was smashed on my mate's head, and he got a little nick on his head. And then with the broken bottle, I got it stabbed in the front of my head, the top of my head, and the back of my head, and I was on my fucking toes, man. Whoosh, like sprinting, fucking hell, because I've never been a fighter.
Yeah.
I thought, God, I'm sweating like fuck, yeah. And when I looked at it, it was blood, and I hadn't realised that it had been a bottle. Do you know what I mean?
Things when your adrenaline's up, you can take stuff like that, and then afterwards you're like, oh shit, like.
and then what was happening was like kind of that person ended up getting caught and arrested, and then when I was going to buy my drugs, there was people who were saying, you know, you shouldn't be going to court about this, and I said, I'm fucking not. I'm not going to court about it. But like, I became like, then I had no safety. I wasn't safe at home. The drugs that I needed when I went to score them, there was always a worry that the people, family responsible for that would kinda, and it was just like, I was done, man. I was fucking done, and that kind of correlates with that time of like consciously planning to take my own life, and do you know what I mean? And then making me way to that to that residential rehabilitation centre. And I remember getting outside of there. I went straight from the rehab, straight from the Loch Psychiatric Unit home to pack some stuff, and then straight into rehab. And I had the most obscure fucking stuff ever. Like, I had a briefcase. I don't know where the fuck I got a briefcase or where I thought I was going.
That's old school, packing a briefcase.
It was a proper briefcase as well. And then like I had like a Rubik's Cube or something. I had a backpack with some clothes in. But I had a letter from number 10 Downing Street as well, because I wrote like, I can't remember who it was at the time, but I wrote number 10 basically saying, I'm a mess and I need help and support, and they sent a letter back. It wasn't from like the Prime Minister out, it was from just an aide or something, who said, you know, George, we hear you and we really wish you well, and this is where you maybe get some help and support. But because it had like the crest of the government and on this paper, it really mattered, man. Do you know what I mean? It was like fucking they took some time to write back, and got outside of that rehab, and I remember my dad putting his arms around us and kissing us on my head, and he said, "George, I love you more than you ever know, son, but I can't let you kill my wife, and you need to go in there, and you need to get well, or don't come home." And they were both in their 70s. My mum had been having a lot of strokes. He'd been having a lot of heart attacks. And he did the right thing, man. He needed to put his wife first. And he'd said it a million times before, you know, like, that there was going to be a consequence of my behaviour. But he'd never, ever followed through. But I knew this day when he said it, he meant it. Yeah. And he got back in the car and he drove away. And I was left with, like, the reality of fucking... just the reality of my world, man, which was like, you're alone, you're shit scared, and you need to go into this building, and fuck knows what it's going to be like. Yeah. But you need to, it's now or never. And and I went in there and stayed there for a year, and stopped drinking, stopped using. It was still a fucking mess. Because there was so much more work that had to be done.
And
do you know what I mean?
that's kind of what I want to touch on next. Because obviously we've spoken a lot about your personal story, a lot of what you went through. I'm just more curious about the overall attitude towards drugs. So when we spoke on the phone, you mentioned something. I think it was like you see drug use more of a symptom of someone's pain rather than the cause, and I really liked that. And I know we've spoke openly about everything, but in terms of attitudes towards drug users and stuff, we don't see the beforehand. We don't see the potential abuse. We don't see the pain that's being caused that makes someone do it. We just see they've done drugs, bad person. But that's not the case. So I'm just curious, where does your head sit on that subject?
Yeah, well, like I've said, and we've dipped our toe in the water with it earlier, right? So we've got to make the distinction that drug use doesn't imply drug addiction, right? So last year in the UK, there was 3.2 million people who used an illegal drug. So it's around 11% of the UK population between the age of 18 and 65 who used an illegal drug, right? Yeah. Whether that was cocaine, whether it was MDMA or other substances. Those people don't go on to develop the problems that I did, right? And typically, they are at risk, right? They're at risk, one, because they're purchasing illegal drugs of organised crime gangs who kind of, there's no regulation around those drugs whatsoever. Do you know what I mean? So people can be, it is dangerous in that sense because people don't know what they're taking. Yeah. And then secondly, people can get criminalised by the police for taking drugs which are less harmful than alcohol. So typically, if you took all of the drugs involved in drug-related deaths last year, all illegal drugs, it wouldn't be half the amount of the number of people who died from alcohol. So it's fucking, that argument's madness, right?
Yeah.
That's madness.
There was a thing actually recently. Do you know the actor Tom Holland? No. So you know Spider-Man. He's played Spider-Man. Yeah. So he was in an interview and he said something really interesting. He said, if alcohol had never existed and you brought it out now, he was like, people will go, what? No, we don't want this.
You couldn't bring it out now. In this country, it would be a Class A drug.
I found that a very interesting way of thinking.
It wouldn't. If it came to market now, right, based on the harms, it would be a Class A drug. You wouldn't be able to regulate it. But we've got in such a place now where the taxation and all of that shit, which is around it's and also Diageo, who are kind of like the alcohol industry, global alcohol industry. They've done like such an amazing job to think that kind of like alcohol's this life-giving fucking social lubricant that we're all like people, you know what, it's mad, man. People will be sitting going, fucking listen to him, he's drug use, or people sit in pubs going, you fucking, that guy's a fucking junkie, this, that and the other. But I stood there with a pint of C2H, 604, like a pint of ethanol.
Alcohol is the only drug that if you don't take it, people assume you've got a problem.
Absolutely, man. Well, man, it's mental, innit? So you have that number, that 3.2 million people, right, who use illegal drugs but don't develop problems like I did. But then according to the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, right, they claim that around 10 or 15% of people who use substances globally do so because they're medicating kind of problems like they're medicating on pain and trauma like I experienced. Yes. So we know that for like, and again, the evidence stacks up, man, that like for a young person who experiences 4 or more adverse childhood experiences compared to a young person who experiences 1 or none, the kid who's experienced 4 or more is 11 times more likely to have used illegal drugs, is 11 times more likely to go into prison, is 7 times more likely to be involved in violence, is 6 times more likely to be involved in underage sex and pregnancy. So we've got this solid evidence base which suggests that the harms that happen to people when they're younger has a direct correlation to them becoming dependent on drugs, right? right?
Yes.
So for me, it's really important that we remember that distinction, that the vast majority of people who use drugs in this country do not end up where I did. So it's wrong to kind of blanket say like all drugs are bad. Do you know what I mean?
I'm just gonna do it. One of my first experiences of being offered drugs, it was on a night out, and I was probably 18, maybe 19, and we were at an event at the O2 called Dirty Pop, and it was a class event. Used to have a bouncy castle and everything, right? And I remember it was me and a couple of friends. I'm not gonna drop any names in this, but we bumped into an old friend from school, and she said, "Oh, like we can all like go back. We've got like big uni flat and stuff. Like you can come back and meet some of the friends." So we were like, "Yeah, we'll all just go." We all went back afterwards, and then she had this little tin with all these little pills, and don't know what it was. Everyone took one, and I didn't, because I was scared of what it would do, and I was like, I've heard all this bad things about it. You know?
They? How were they?
Oh, fucked. But the best part was it was quite a big uni accommodation, and I was just like, I was so tired, man, because I just had been drinking, and you know what, you get tired after a while. So I just passed out on the sofa, and I woke up the next morning feeling like kind of okay, a little bit foggy, but I was like, all right. And one of my friends who'd accepted these pills, he was just sat across the other sofa. I remember seeing this. And I was like, "You all right, mate?" He was like, "Haven't slept." He was like, "I feel horrendous." And I walked back like into town and stuff to get like a taxi home and stuff. And I was like, "You're not okay?" He was like, "Mate, I've had no sleep. I don't know what was in that pill." But I was like, "Bro," I was like,
and you know what? But that's the point, isn't it? Like that again, huge risk factor is like people are taking pills and they don't know what's in them as well.
Yeah, and also these people that I went with, the girl offered them, happily married, whatever now, right?
Yeah.
The few of the guys that I was with. Kids, happy life. No addiction just because they touched it.
No, and I think, and equally, and I think for me, so like I said to you on the phone that I am pro drugs and people's ability to take them. You know, I think it's a person's human right to decide what it is that they ingest and put inside of their own body. And if what we're going to do is we're going to allow people to consume alcohol, which kills around alcohol-specific deaths, which are attributed to kind of like alcohol addictions, around about 10,500 people every year. So we know that alcohol's dangerous. We know that it can kill people. However, you can still get out into the pubs tonight and buy it in supermarkets and corner shops and everything else. And what we do is we make people aware that alcohol used in a wrong way can be harmful and it can be dangerous. Do you know what I mean? So what we're going to then do is, like as a government, as a society, we're going to trust your judgment that you're going to kind of get it right. And for the vast majority of people who use alcohol, they get it right.
Yeah.
And then there's a percentage of people who don't. But we don't ban alcohol based on the fact that it's dangerous. What we do is we help people to make the right decisions and all the rest of it. However, when it comes to illicit drugs, we ban them outright. So then we end up with situations like that girl who's got a tin of something where she's been told it's one thing, perhaps MDMA. Like, how is she meant to know if it's MDMA without... She doesn't have a mass spectrometer or a FTIR analyzer, do you know what I mean, or reagent test. So it's a bit like Russian roulette, actually, because we're putting our trust in the hands of organised crime gangs when it would be really easy to regulate all illegal drugs. They've done it in other parts of the world, so people actually know what it is that they're taking. So I just feel for me, like, kind of, I'm not sat here right now saying that kind of drugs aren't dangerous. Like the message has to be the safest way to take drugs is not to take them. However, what we know is people want to take them because when you end up taking the thing which you think that it is, that MDMA, methyl dioxymethamphetamine, ecstasy, if you get ecstasy, man, and you do it in the right dose, what a night you're going to fucking have, because it's fucking great. But people are shit scared to talk about, like, everyone's meant to go, oh, drugs are really, really bad. Like you asked me on the phone the other day when I was down in wherever I was.
Plymouth.
Plymouth. I could have fucking... Plymouth. Like you said, when was the last time you took a drug? I said last night. It was, do you know what I mean? It's
but that kind of took me back, because what I love about your attitude is people would definitely expect you to be, after what you've been through, to be very anti-drug, right? Yeah. To be like, don't take drugs. This is what happened to me. Learn from my lessons. But you're like, look, I'm a realist. You're gonna take them. I'm gonna teach you how to do it properly. And at first I was like, I can't believe you still do them. But now that I have spoke to you properly, because obviously this is a weird interview, right? Because I've never touched them. Right?
Oh, what we should do? We should do another one. We should do another one with a half an each, right? It would be a really interesting social experiment.
Yeah.
Because it's one of them. Like, I'm not Maverick, man. Look, my my thinking around this isn't to be kind of reckless. Do you know what I mean? I'm not reckless in that messaging, but I have to be like, what am I supposed to do, man, Adam? Like, I had all that experience of sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, pain, not for a week or a month, but for years. Then I ended up with like 10 or 15 years entrenched in fucking like hardcore addiction and unsafe drug use. And then all of a sudden I end up in rehab for a year and I stopped drinking and I stopped using and I'm still not well. Do you know what I mean? And like, so I have to go on this other journey. And I kind of like, what am I meant to do with those years of experiences? I can either pretend they didn't happen and then go about my business as ordinary George, which I'll never fucking be because there's no ordinary about me, which is good, right? Or I can use these experiences to educate people, but I've got to educate them from a place of truth.
Yes.
And the truth is that what happened to me is not the norm. More people use drugs and don't end up where I did than where I did. But what we do is we focus on like the negative aspects of drug use, not the positive. Like for me, when I said I'd used drugs the night before, the drug which I used was cannabis, and I'm prescribed cannabis. I get it from a private clinic, and if you're fortunate enough to be in a position like me where you can buy it, then I'm no longer going to get criminalised. Like I was teaching police officers in Scotland Yard in November. I turned up at Scotland Yard with my backpack on, came out of the hotel, flew to Scotland. Well, I didn't fly, running down the embankment to get to Scotland Yard because I was running late. Got to the front of Scotland Yard. 2 armed police there. What's your name? Told them my name. Said, right, get yourself in. Walked into the foyer. And as soon as I got into the foyer, I looked left and there's airport-style security there. Yeah. And then it hits me. I go, oh, shit. I've got fucking cannabis in my bag. So then I think, well, what do I do here? Because I can't turn around and walk out. There's 100 cops behind that security that are waiting for me to go and train them. So I think, right, just blag it, put your fucking bag on, say now. So I put my bag down, and they didn't find it, right? So I was like, I swerved. So then I got in this room with 100 cops, and I get up and I go, my name's Gorgeous George Charlton. I'm going to talk to you today about kind of like the impact of stigma and trauma on people who use drugs. And but as an out and proud drug law reformer, I kind of feel I need to be really congruent and say, I'm not sure how many people knowingly bring drugs into Scotland Yard, but I have. Do you know what I mean?
Wow, so you got on stage and admitted this.
So then there was this rapturous laughter from them, and I went, no, seriously, I have. And what I want to tell you is, if you want to go in my bag now, you're going to find drugs. I'm not going to tell you what, but I'm going to tell you I've got drugs in my bag. And but what I'm going to ask is that you show me the courtesy to let me do my input first. And if you want to nick me on the way out, I promise.
So let's do my speech, and then you can say
that. And then also kind of like, so the laughter was a bit more subdued then, because I'm thinking, who the fuck's this guy? Do you know what I mean? But then I kind of asked the question, like, please do us a favour, like, if you've ever used an illegal substance, please would you stand up now? And out of a room of 100, there was only 4 who stood up. And I kind of said, firstly, thank you for your honesty and your bravery, because I know it's took a lot for you to stand up there. Can you tell us what it is that you used to take, or maybe currently take? And there was laid explored with MDMA and cocaine and cannabis. And I said, like, thank you for your honesty. But what I know is, the rest of you lot are fucking liars. Do you know what I mean? Because this is who I am. You know what I mean? The rest of you lot are fucking liars.
Do you know what? That story is amazing, because you must have beach ball size testicles, right? Because you walked into Scotland Yard with drugs, called out the coppers on their bullshit, and just I just think it's amazing. No. Yeah, I just think it's amazing.
Again, but listen, for me though, right? Like for me, like I'm an advocate for the underdog, right? Like if you look at me on my socials, that's what it kind of says. I'm an avid drug law reformer. I'm an avid harm reductionist, and I'm an advocate for the underdog. And I think that like we have to speak truth to power, and sometimes that means kind of like calling out the bullshit. Do you know what I mean? Like kind of like, and if that means at times I've got to make myself vulnerable in terms of doing that, then I will. But listen, like that wasn't about there was no kind of, oh shit, I shouldn't have said. There is actually a little bit of that. There is a little bit of like, should I do it? Because it's very there's something innate within all of us actually that says don't do that. And equally, there's something innate in me that when I'm doing these inputs for cops and social workers and school kids and like I talk a lot about that kind of like the sexual abuse. Like I am prepared to allow myself to be really, really vulnerable, which internally, like everything inside me goes, don't fucking do it. However, like that, there's a cohort of people globally who are disenfranchised and broken and stigmatized and vilified and demonized and hurt and punished because of their drug use. And for me, I feel like that I am a champion for them. But
Yes.
it's not just like me, you know. There's a network of people like me among my network who we do what we can to be out and proud and honest about the substances that we take, man. But I don't want to go back to America. I've been once and it was shit, so I don't mind kind of getting stopped and criminalised now for cannabis. But the point is, like, they can't criminalise me for it.
Yeah.
They'd be like, oh, cannabis. I've got a fucking prescription for it.
Yeah.
Man. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
reality is all of these illegal drugs which people are taking and being criminalised for, we can give them it on the NHS. Like, my mum was a heroin user. She took heroin for 10 years. The heroin she took, she got off her doctor. It was stronger and more pure than any illegal heroin, and it was called diamorphine. And we give diamorphine to people all of the time. You ever had an operation?
I haven't actually. No, I haven't actually. No, yeah.
Well, it's so when people have operations and they get put under and have the magic milk or that white, that's diamorphine. It's pharmaceutical grade heroin. So we can give it to nice old ladies like my mum. Oh, isn't she lovely, George's mum? She makes grey hair and she makes jam tarts and she's such a beautiful lady. Let's make her life better. But like with me, psychological pain, which I was using on in the end, they could have done that for me. But no, we don't want to do that. We want to make their lives more difficult. We want to call them the scum of the earth, dirty fucking junkies, write headlines like zombies on our streets, you know. Like when I was speaking at that Morty gig, man, like there's been a couple of times where like people talk about like exercise junkie, or there's like, and I've heard on other people's podcasts the words junkie and they're getting used. You need to fucking stop it, man, because it's like it's inhumane and it's fucking horrible. Like, those people are somebody's son, somebody's daughter, somebody's husband, somebody's wife, somebody's somebody, and nobody likes a drug user until it becomes your drug user and your family's in the shit with addiction. Then all of a sudden you want everyone to kind of be wrapping their arms around your family, which we should all do, man.
Yeah. No, it's a very interesting topic. So, moving into this yellow bar on the table here, for those of you who are just listening and not watching this, A, you can't see how gorgeous George actually is, but B, you can't see this yellow box. So tell me about this yellow box and why you push so hard for it these days.
Yeah. So the little yellow box is a drug called naloxone. And what naloxone is a drug which reverses heroin overdoses. It's not a new substance. It's been around since the 1960s, developed by a guy called Dr. Fishburne, who was trying to find a remedy for constipation and ended up creating a molecule which reversed opiate overdoses. In terms of why I'm so passionate about the product, across the UK, drug-related deaths are higher than they've ever been before. Year on year, the numbers go up and up and up. Since numbers began, since we started capturing drug-related deaths, numbers have always gone up, not down. Northeast of England, where we're from, has got the highest rate of drug-related deaths in the whole of England and Wales. And around 2/3 of all drug-related deaths involve heroin or methadone or other opiates. So this yellow box naloxone, this is going to it's going to reverse a heroin overdose, allow somebody the time that they need to breathe, to start breathing again, and for paramedics to be able to turn up and kind of give medical help. Like the last 20 years, I've worked in lots of different environments, in lots of drug treatment organisations and all the rest of it. Probably the last 10 years I've been doing a lot of work just for me. And I had a bit of a moment about 4 years ago where people were talking about naloxone. And if I'm honest, like, I was thinking, what the fuck's this naloxone stuff about? I wasn't completely tuned into what it was about.
I'd never heard of it until I heard of you, no.
So I thought, fucking, I'm around people who use drugs all the time. Maybe I should get my hands on one of these kits. So it is a prescription-only medicine, but you don't have to go to the doctors to get it. You can get it from a drug treatment provider. And anybody who's likely to witness an overdose can get naloxone, can be trained to use it, and then you could use that on somebody if you ever seen someone overdosing in the streets, right? So your viewers, your listeners who think, oh, well, I'm not around people who use drugs, so I don't need one of them. It's bullshit. You do, because if any town, city, community, anywhere you're walking about, you're walking past people who use drugs. We see people all of the time who are maybe doing a bit of begging, people in the streets. But also, that's a really bad example, because it's not just people like
homeless people and stuff.
who are using opiates.
Yeah,
like I use opiates now. My mum used opiates. There's lots of pain meds which get used by lots of different people. So I thought, right, I need to get myself one. I knew you could get one from drug treatment providers. So the local drug treatment service where I live in Durham, I got in touch with them. I phoned them up and said, I believe that you're doing naloxone. I believe you can get trained in 10 minutes. Can I come down and get trained and get a kit?
Yeah.
And they said, we don't do the kits. And I said, I'm pretty sure you do. And he said, no, we definitely don't. I said, can I leave my name and my number? Can you ask for us? Phone us back and let us know. They said, not a problem. They took my name, took my number, and then they didn't phone back. So I thought, right. So I phoned back again, spoke to somebody different, and again they said they didn't do it. I was certain that all so I thought, right, fuck it, I'm going to use this as a bit of a social research experiment, actually see how difficult it is to get access to naloxone. So then I ended up going on this mission for about 4 weeks, me phoning up, speaking to different people, and eventually got to speak to a harm reduction nurse in that organisation who shall remain nameless. And I said, do you do naloxone? She said, yes. I was like, fucking get in. Can I come down and get a kit? And she says, well, I'll need to ask me boss. And I said, I don't understand why you need to ask your boss for me just to have one kit. Like, surely if you're responsible clinically for harm reduction, you're responsible for training people with naloxone. Surely it's within your gift to say, come down and get a kit. She said, I need to ask my boss. And,
do you think maybe she wasn't trained herself, didn't know the procedures and stuff?
No, she was trained.
Oh, she was?
There's probably something else to it, which again, we'll not get into.
Right, okay, no worries.
But anyway, so like, So she said she would ask her boss. She took me email and said she would get in touch with us, and she did get in touch with us. And the email said, "Dear George, we are very sorry we can't action your request." Turned us down, right?
Okay.
And thank fuck they did, man. Because like if on day one when I'd phoned up they said like, "Oh, you can come down and get a kit," I'd have been like, "Well, hey," and I would have had my kit, but that would have been it. Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't have I would have been off doing something else. But the very fact that they told me that I couldn't, right? It made me think like, what happens if I leave the house today or tomorrow and I come across somebody who's having an overdose and I don't have this? Like, surely it shouldn't be that hard to get access to the product. So I ended up going on a mission. I thought, fuck this, I'm going to build a project to make sure it's not difficult for anyone to get access to naloxone. So I went and spoke to the company that makes the product, and I kind of talked about, was there any chance of getting a small development grant which would help me to develop a peer project, which I was given. I went down to see Danny Ahmed at Foundations in Middlesbrough and said, Danny, if I bring my own wages for 12 weeks, can I have an office? Can I get access to your naloxone in the treatment service, and can I get access to your clients? And I want to build a project which teaches people with lived and living experience of addiction, teaches your clients not only how to use it, but how to train other people how to use it. So he was like, why, I no brainer, let's do it. So then we ended up developing the first peer-to-peer naloxone program, as we call it, in Middlesbrough, and trained up a bunch of guys from the Harm Reduction Union. That was the name they give themselves. And then we started going out into the community with backpacks of the stuff, with people who, like, not just people who were in recovery, but active drug users, right? Who were kind of stopping their mates in the streets and going, oh, kid, come here, let us tell you about this drug. Look, there's a naloxone kit for you. So we had, like, rather than having to physically go to brick buildings to get access to naloxone, which is what you had to do, now we had cohorts of people in Middlesbrough who were trained up going out into the community and having positive conversations around overdose prevention, signs and symptoms of an overdose, what people are looking for, doing naloxone demonstrations on the streets, and then literally giving this stuff away. And it was fucking fire, man. I'm telling you, it was like fucking hell. So, like, I've always been like, because, like, whilst I am out there, aren't I? You know, like you see the way I am in my socials and that. I'm kind of quite needy. I do like the likes and stuff. But my messaging's always like, it's always good messaging. But I guess for me, I didn't want the project to be about me. I wanted it to be about people who use drugs. Do you know what I mean? I want, like, look at what they're doing with my support. Look at what they're doing with the support of the provider. Not look at what George and the provider are doing with people who. There's a big difference in that. You know, it was about them getting the kudos and the love. So I started telling their stories. And about their achievements and their journeys through social media, and it started to kind of like a lot of likes. People kind of people liking seeing people doing well. And it wasn't long before then another drug treatment provider, We Are With You, came along from Redcorn, said, we really like the look of that project, and we have one. And it was like, yeah, okay. And it was interesting, man, because like I've never really been an astute business person, right? Like, I've always I still carry a bit of that baggage at times of like, oh my God, like, fucking, like, how the fuck have I found myself in this position? I'm a bit of a worrier, do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So then I had this foundations project going in Middlesbrough, and then I had the Red Car project, and all of a sudden my head went pop. Like, how the fuck am I going to do 2 projects? I was like, I was really flapping about how I was going to manage that, and then I kind of had some of like, self-esteem, self-doubt, because I'm a bit of I'm kind of either fucking right up there, hey, or I can kind of be very reserved.
I get
in some
that.
ways.
I get that.
Do you know what I mean? So, but then it took off, man, and like I think over the last 3.5 years, I've done the project I've just done. Where was I? Was it this week? This week I was in Plymouth. That was project number 66 in 3 years. So
Jesus.
like been all over. I'm saying me and me dominant sub-personalities, been all over the fucking the UK, recruiting people who use drugs, making them feel fucking really, really special, telling them about the project, asking them if they would like to own these projects and be involved, for them to decide their aims, their objectives, their ground rules, their support needs, what colour hoodies and t-shirts they want, what name they're going to give their group. And it's just been amazing, man. And it's been, like, for me, it's probably been some of the most rewarding work that I've ever done, to see lads and lasses who spent a lifetime being told they're not worth anything, they're not going to be good at anything, they're terrible parents, they're the scum of the earth, they're just junkies, do you know what I mean? Then all of a sudden seeing them wearing hoodies and t-shirts with Ask Me About Naloxone, wearing like a Salford Achieved Soldiers logo or a LSD logo with Life-Saving Dealers, do you know what I mean? And seeing them out in the community training members of the public, where members of the public are starting to go, I can't believe that was your story, but the work that you're doing is so amazing. We're really, really proud of you. And you go, wow, man, because now this cohort of people who've been written off in society are now getting love and recognition. And for me, it's always about helping them to realise that, like, fucking, that they've got a qualification that nobody wants. They've been through pain, they've been through trauma, they've been through hurt, they've been through rape, they've been through domestic violence, they've been through abuse, they've been through fucking the prison system, they've been involved in prostitution, they've been in, like, you know, like, in harrowing fucking places and spaces, not just with one of those things, with all of those things. And what we can do with that is we can turn that on its head, and rather than looking at that as something which is like the thing which makes you hopeless, it's the thing which makes you fucking powerful, man. And that idea of, like, if you want that qualification, then you've got to spend 10 years of that pain in order to get it. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's like, if I was to go to a life coach and say, my life's a mess, I need some help, and they were like, well, that's cool, my story is, I've been through nothing, but I like the sound of motivational quotes and I want to help people. I'd be like, probably not the best, but if I said to a life coach, my life's a mess, I need help, and they said to me, I've been there, this is my story, I've been through absolute shit, and I'm like, fuck, I want to listen to this person, because you can relate to their pain, they can relate to yours. And I think it's like, if some, like, we used to get people come into school, when I remember, like, a couple of times, like, they don't do drugs, people, you know, and, like, they've never touched a fucking drug in their life, they're just doing it because they're like, yeah, no drugs, you know what I mean? And it's like, if you'd came in and said, this is my story, I want, if you're going to use them, fucking do it this way, because it'll save your life, I'd be like, oh, that makes more sense, you know?
Yeah, and you know what? And I think you're right, man. It's like, I don't, you know, like, I just feel fucking blessed, man. Honestly, I feel
but
like...
you're doing an amazing job.
But it's not a job. That's the thing, right? It's like, one of my favourite quotes is, like, find a job that you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And it's a privilege, bro, you know what I mean? Like, the last 4 weeks, right? The last 4 weeks I've been, I went from Durham to fucking Hounslow and then back. I've been Durham on the Isle of Wight and then back. I've been to Durham to Ashford in Kent and back. I'm going, where else? I'm sure I've been to other places. I've probably done
everywhere, man.
4,000 miles in the last 4 weeks.
Yeah.
To connect with people, to make them see that they're fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Like, that's beautiful, man. You're like, so it's like...
I love seeing your face light up when you say this as well.
Because it's true, man. It's like fucking, you know, like that idea that, like, nothing happens to me, everything happens for me. You know? And I've got this line where I go, you know, the worst thing that ever happened to me life was addiction. You know what I mean? But the best thing that ever happened to me life was that. Because without that, then I probably wouldn't be the person that I am today. And then it's really like through being congruent and open about my experiences, it allows other people to dip their toe in the water. You know, me and Morty went and spoke at a prison recently where all the lads come in. There was about 80 of them coming in. Me and him are in this church in a chapel, and he's bouncing around doing his thing as he does, and he does his thing, and then I do mine. And what we see, man, is we watch the face when the lads come in initially, right? They've got that fucking jail faces on and that big posture, because you need that to survive in the prison estate. You know what I mean? But like an hour or so with us, right? We'll watch the mask drop. When now all of a sudden they've got this tattooed fuckwit standing in front of them, talking about being anally raped, talking about being hit and hurt. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's permission given, man. And like a lot of those lads in tears, and then as they left to go, like there was a queue, man. There's a queue to cuddle Paul, there was a queue to cuddle me, although it's just like, and there's people hugging me going, that happened to me.
It's respect as well.
That happened to me. Do you know what I mean? And if we start stripping this thing back, man, like we've got people in the prison system. 1 in 4 people in the prison system are there today for non-violent drug-related offences, right? And when you talk to a person impacted by addiction, or those people who are on our streets who we show such disdain to, or we walk right, give them a fucking wide berth because they think they're going to jump on us, right? Like, go and sit down next to one of those people. Give them a quid, but give them your time.
Yeah.
And go and sit down next to one of those people, and firstly, they'll look at you like you're fucking mad because they're not used to that. Then what will happen is society, or those people walking past you, they're also going to look at you like you're fucking mad because they're going to be thinking, what you do, and sit down with him or her and ask them, right? Like, what happened in your life? Tell me your story, man. Who are you? And listen to that story, and it'll break your fucking heart.
Yeah.
And every one of the people that I work with, they're the most inspiring, courageous, like they're beautiful people, man. And their stories are filled with pain and hurt and trauma, and before people are quick to fucking judge, man, go and do a week in their life. Do you know what I mean? Go and do a week in their life or their existence, and if you might find some solitude and comfort in using a fucking substance, you probably would, man. But the backstories of a lot of these people are a lot like mine, man. And rather than institutionalizing people and putting them in prisons and all the rest of it, we should be showing love and humanity and fucking compassion. And I'm all about that. You know, in my sector, health and social care, if you talk about loving your clients, you're fucking unprofessional. Well, I was once labelled the most unprofessional professional ever by a social work manager. He told us in front of his team, he said, "You are the most unprofessional professional I think I've ever met." And I said, "Well, brother, thank you very much. I'm going to wear that shit like a badge of honor." And I do. Because I love the people I work with. And I make sure that they feel that from me, because somebody was good enough to do that for me. My mum and dad did that for me. There's been people on my journey who had my back, who made me feel that, like, that I mattered. And I guess for me, that's kind of like, that's what my business is built on, is like, well, loads of awesome shit. But, but at the core of everything that I do is I want people to know I believe in them, that I love them, that I care about them, that they matter, whether they're using drugs or not. I've got their fucking back, man. And
man.
It's beautiful. Yeah,
it's amazing what you do. I remember watching that. I watched that Vice thing on Snapchat and stuff, and I was like, fuck, this looks incredible. Like, it's mad when, like, I look at stuff like that and I go, like, it really, hearing your story. This is one thing I was told by Luke when he heard you speak. He was like, the thing about George is, you make your problems seem fucking insignificant. Like, you'll just make you feel like you think you've been through some shit. Like, there's always someone that's been through worse.
And you know what, though, Adam, and it was lush to kind of to be around Luke, because he's a real inspiration, as are you, and kind of people with him were unstoppable networks and inner circle and stuff like that, you know. And for me, it really isn't about that, you know. It's not about like that other people's problems are insignificant, you know, like problems are problems.
Yeah, true. I mean, I shouldn't have used the word insignificant.
No, and it wasn't, you didn't use the word insignificant. What I'm saying is that, like, kind of when Luke suggests that, kind of like, you listen to my story, it makes us think, other people think that what we're going through doesn't matter. It all matters. Do you know what I mean? It's pain. Well,
the worst thing you've been through is the worst thing you've been through.
And regardless, do you know what I mean? Regardless of whether that's kind of like being beaten with straps like I went through, or potentially kind of somebody like falling out of love with somebody or not in a relationship. You know, it's all kind of everyone's pain's everyone's pain.
Yeah.
And it needs to be kind of like, it needs to be met with the same kind of stuff, you know. And
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where I'm at, you know. I kind of just see a very quick and fast world in which we live, where we don't necessarily stop sometimes and just kind of pause and go like, what can I give of me to other people to help those people? Do you know what I mean? And I don't know. It's just one of them. I'm like, my name's George Charlton. Like, my mum was called Rita. My dad was called George. I had a really painful time as a kid. I caused a lot of problems in my own life through using substances in a way which wasn't fucking wise. And now I'm somebody's dad, you know. I'm Madison's dad. I'm Charlotte's dad. I feel fucking like, I wake up, man. No shit, man. I wake up now and I'm buzzing when I wake up, man. It's like fucking life's a real blessing for me. And I'm going through bits of stuff at the minute which I'm not going to talk about now, which has been painful for the last couple of years, you know. But it's like, in order for the light to shine so brightly, first the darkness must be present, and fucking,
Absolutely.
it's one of them.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I've only got a couple of questions for you before we round up, mate. So one thing I'm really interested in is Madison and Charlotte, because a lot of the time, kids don't know everything their parents have gone through. They don't understand their parents' story completely. Your kids, however, know everything. They've heard this. So I'm just curious, what was their response when they've heard this? Like, how do they fit into the projects that you do now?
Yeah, man. Well, I think for me, I've always been open and honest and transparent. It was really difficult, you know, like Charlotte's 21, Madison's 15. Like, I'm such a gobshite, right, that I end up kind of like attracting like news articles and stuff like that or radio shows. So it's really difficult in some ways to keep that part hidden from them. Do you know what I mean? So like obviously when Charlotte was a bit younger and stuff, and she's kind of going, well, what, you getting interviewed off? Because they think it was great initially getting interviewed off the press and whatever. I'm going, well, you kind of know like that I made a mess of things, and it's always been about the right time to have those conversations, you know. So when they were very young, I certainly wasn't going to be talking about like childhood sexual abuse and stuff like that, but I was dipping my toe in the water with them, saying like dad used different drugs and kind of did end up in jail and all the rest of it, and that would generate some conversations. Then as they've got a little bit older, like they've both been in and around like presentations where I'm talking as openly about my experiences with them in a room. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it feels right that they understand that dad's not flawless, do you know? Well, kind of almost, but you know what I mean. But like, 99%. But then, like Madison, for instance, like Maddie, she fucking loves it, man. Like she would tell you, like she's a young drug law reformer, and like I take her. Last year we went on to the. I got invited by the Arran Youth Foundation to go onto the Isle of Arran. They've got a like, when the holidays and things come, to do like youth groups and all that for the kids. So we got invited to go and spend 3 days. I did, to go and spend 3 days over there. My wife was away, so I was kind of like, I spoke to Graham and said, mate, I have a bit of a problem. What's the problem? I said, I've got Madison. He said, oh, bring her over. So it was like road trips. So like Madison's completely comfortable, trained up around the naloxone and how to use it. She's like, she knows loads about like all of the different kinds of drugs. So her and I do like drugs education inputs together as well. It was lush. Just like on the island this one day, there's like 50 kids. They're all sat in a semicircle, and there's just this little dot of a person, Madison, with a nice people take drugs t-shirt on, like sat showing them how to use this. Do you know what I mean? Like she does drugs education sessions for police cadets. Like we did some stuff with a national campaigning group called Anyone's Child, where she was training adults how to use naloxone and giving it away. She's got like, they're both really caring girls, man. Like,
switched on.
Totally. And that's where I want them to be, you know. It's like, you touched on it earlier when we talk to young people and that, about kind of people going into schools and saying, don't take drugs because if you take them you're going to die. And then the kids go, well, this guy's full of fucking shit, because there's people in our friendship group who are taking drugs now and they're not dying. So this guy's got an agenda and he's full of shit, so the kids no longer believe us, you know. So like for me and Maddie, when we go in and do these inputs or bits and pieces with Charlotte, it is very much about saying the safest way to take drugs is not to take them. However, there's kids in this room who are, and that's fine. You're not going to get judged off me. Have a listen to me story. And and then if you want to talk afterwards about different kinds of substances and harm reduction, then we're here to do it. So I don't know, man. I just think I think we should be definitely having conversations with children which are based on truth.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
I agree.
And for me, I want to create environments, definitely for my girls, like, I just engaged my brain at the right time. I want to create conversations environments for my girls where if they're ever thinking about using substances, and come and talk to me about it.
Yes.
We can do our research together. And if they're going to use drugs, they're going to use drugs.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to be the first person they come and talk to, in the knowledge that they're not going to get wrong.
They're not going to get a lecture.
They're not going to get a lecture from me. And I think the more environments we can create where people can be open and honest about drug use, that's where we start to make a difference on the deaths and drug harms. But you know what, man, Adam, I'm extremely lucky. I've got two great kids. Charlotte's she's applied for. She's doing a criminology degree at Manchester Uni currently.
Amazing.
She's just applied for to join the Manchester Police Force.
Nice.
Maddie's plain daft. She's like, she wants to be a pilot. Like fucking.
That's good.
I just feel really lucky, man. I'm just really lucky to have the things that I
Yeah.
have. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, which leads nicely into my final question for you, mate. And it's a question that I've been debating for quite a while in my head, and now I've decided to bring.
MDMA with me, and then
that's the question. Yeah, that is the question. Yeah. How did you know? Have you seen my questions? Yeah. But the question that I'm going to start asking every guest. You're the second guest I've asked this to, and you can answer this however you want. This is totally personal. Do you consider yourself a success? And you can take a second on this.
No, that's cool, man. Yeah, man, I'm a fucking machine, man. Do you know what I mean? Am I a success? And there's nothing wrong with that, you know. I think, like, humility's important, isn't it? But you know what, man? It's like, am I a success because I've turned my life around after drugs? No, that doesn't. You know what, right? That I get this a lot, man, right? I get like, oh, George, have you seen George Charlton? He's such a success. No, I'm not really in some respects, right? Because, like, I'm a 50-year-old bloke. I've had about 20-odd years to get me shit together. Mm-hmm. What I'm doing now is expected, right? I expect this of myself. Do you know what I mean, right? Like, the winners in my game are the fucking kids, lads and lasses on day one whose worlds are falling apart, who lift their heads up and kind of go, man, I need to try and sort my life out. They're more successful than I ever will be. However, right? In my game, I'm definitely a fucking who, man. That struck me, right? You know, like, working with Paul's been transformational for me across the last couple of years, man, in terms of just, like, good guy, man. But just in terms of my identity, self-esteem, confidence, all of that stuff, it's all been kind of like, I think I had all of that stuff, but he's helped to gel all of that stuff together. Yeah. But look, man, I'm not successful. I'm fucking mighty. That's who I am.
Ooh, I might have to change my questions. And then, do you feel mighty?
Yeah. Look, I'm mighty. I'm energized. I'm grateful. I'm blessed. I'm many, many things, man. And
he's mighty. He's gorgeous. He's George mighty, fucking Charlton.
He's mighty. He's gorgeous. It's gorgeous, George.
You need a song. We need a song. Yeah, we need an intro music. Yeah.
I totally, man. Intro music. Smooth operator. No, I don't know, man. There's nothing wrong in me saying, like, do I consider myself a success? Absolutely. And I hope that I can inspire and help many, many other people not to be like me. Fuck that. We don't want too many more me in the fucking UK. But I hope I can inspire and support many, many other people to find their place in the world so they can become fucking even more amazing than I am. And that's my vision. That's what I'm about.
Amazing, mate. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on here. Where can people follow you and find your journey?
On Twitter, I am at GBMC73 or X, whatever we're calling it these days.
That's not called Twitter.
Facebook, GC. Is it? GC Training and Consultancy Services, and just search for George Charlton on LinkedIn. You'll probably just see a load of yellow spandex, and that's kind of like that's another story.
That's the one that looks on.
And listen, like, really enjoy talking to you as well. Like, it's not easy, Adam, to kind of open up about this stuff. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? But definitely, you've made me feel extremely safe, psychologically safe here to do that.
And thank you very much. I appreciate that. Podcast, man. Yeah, thanks, man. Well, listen, guys, please follow George what he does. What he does is absolutely amazing, and he's just, everything that he posts is just so full of, it's just good vibes, I think, that you give off. So go follow George, and as always, guys, please leave us the 5-star review. No one wants a 4-star review. What are these 4-star reviews keep coming in? 5-star, and be nice. Okay, it takes a second of your day to make mine. So thank you very much, guys, and I will see you in the next episode.